Hello every pony, and welcome back. We are now ready for Angelswift Chapter 14. Ahem. The entire cave was silent, save for the far-off rumbling sounds echoing through the cave. Cherry heard a moaning sound from on top of her, which she recognized as Scootaloo's. Scootaloo? Oh, that hurt. Cherry heard the pain in her voice. "Are you okay?" Cherry asked. Scootaloo didn't respond right away. She just groaned in response. Cherry opened her eyes, and the lantern had rolled right next to her. There was so much dust around that some quickly got into her eyes, and she had to blink a few times to clear them, so she could see again. Cherry heard Apple Bloom call out softly from close by. "Is every pony okay?" Sweetie Belle started coughing from right next to Cherry. They were all pretty close together. Cherry felt an immense guilt come over her. Her want for a stupid gym almost got her friends hurt, and she'd never forgive herself if anything had happened to them. Cherry looked up at Scootaloo and saw the cooking pot on her head was crushed, most likely from the large rock that almost landed on her. "Scootaloo!" Cherry shouted. The cave rumbled again, a few loose stones shaking down from above. "Shh, Cherry!" Scootaloo groaned as she got off of her. I'm fine." The cooking pot Scootaloo was wearing on her head had a large split in it, and Cherry could see a large lump swelling up on Scootaloo's head, just under her mane from where a heavy rock had fallen on her. If she wasn't wearing that as protection, then the split would have been in her skull. Scootaloo dropped the pot onto the floor with a metallic thud. Then she sat against the wall. "Well, I guess that makes us even," she groaned as she leaned back and closed her eyes. You're hurt," Cherry said as she got up and moved to her friend's side. "Nah, I've had worse falling off my scooter. I'll be fine." Scootaloo put on a brave face. It was hurting quite a lot, but she wasn't about to admit that to any pony. Cherry turned to Sweetie Belle, who was still lying in the dirt with Apple Bloom checking if she was all right. She hadn't gotten up since the cave collapsed. "We've got to get some ice for Scootaloo. It'll take the swelling down, just like when I sprained my hoof. Quickly, we need to get her home." The cave rumbled again. Apple Bloom looked at the pink filly and shook her head. "We can't." "What? Why?" Apple Bloom pointed at where the cave collapsed, and Cherry saw that they were trapped. The cave-in had blocked off the only exit. The rocks blocked it all the way up to the top. She couldn't even see through to the other side. Cherry started panicking. Trapped in a small, narrow corridor, and with her friend in need of help. Sweetie Belle coughed again, then slowly, with Apple Bloom's help, stood up and saw Scootaloo against the wall. "Oh no, what happened?" Sweetie Belle asked. "A rock landed on her. The cooking pot took most of the impact," Cherry said in a panic. "Don't you have anything in your saddlebag that could help?" Sweetie Belle shook her head. "I'm sorry. I never expected any pony to get hurt." Sweetie Belle looked closer at the lump forming and also saw a deep bruise starting to come out from where the rim of the cooking pot had smashed into her head. Scootaloo would be lucky if she didn't have a concussion from this. "You two want to stop fussing over me? I told you I'm fine." "Yeah, but for how long? We're trapped in here." Apple Bloom's panic was rising, but she kept her voice down. She didn't want an extra cave-in. "How are we going to get out?" asked Sweetie Belle. Tears started to show in her eyes. Cherry's heart was begging to break. This was all her fault. She had to fix this. She moved over to where the fallen rock wall was and began shoving some of the rocks out of the way, but as the tiny ones were moved, they revealed much larger ones. They were not going to be shifted by a pony of her size. The other four fillies tried to help Cherry move the larger boulders, but it was in vain. There was no way they were going to move this wall. "Y'all are kidding me, right? You attacked Zecora." Lance was telling the story of how he had encountered a hydra in the swamp and what happened after that. Lance had never seen the timber wolves that the zebra had saved the fillies from, so he thought it was the Zecora that was attacking the girls. I know I jumped to the wrong conclusion, but after the Hydra I was in so much pain I wasn't thinking straight. I just reacted. Tell me you wouldn't do the same for your sister. I take protecting my kin very seriously. I've just come to realize that you can't always be there when they need you most, so y'all gotta teach them as much as you can and not treat them like a baby. Lance wasn't sure he agreed with Apple Bloom on this, but it seemed like every pony had a different way to deal with young fillies and colts, so who is to say that his way was wrong? Applejack pushed a few bushes out of the way as she led Lance and Fluttershy further into the farm. Soon they reached a really well-made and beautifully kept treehouse. Lance couldn't help but notice that this little filly's clubhouse was in better condition than his own when he first came to Ponyville. "Apple Bloom!" Applejack called out as she walked up a pair of slopes leading to the front door of the clubhouse. Applejack knocked and then looked in the window and saw no pony was in there. Opening the door, she stepped inside, followed by Lance and Fluttershy. "Oh my, they've done a wonderful job of keeping this place looking nice," Fluttershy complimented, taking note of all the small items placed around the clubhouse to make it look like a home. Lance's attention was drawn to the wall in the back where two hoof-drawn maps were placed on the wall. The first looked like Ponyville with X's through each building, and the other looked like the Everfree Forest. Lance took a closer look and saw the swamp he was attacked in, and on the other side was a cave with a large circle drawn around it. "Hey, either of you know where this is?" The other two ponies looked at the map. Fluttershy was the first to respond. "That's the cave on the other side of Froggy Bottom Bog. That's the cave on the other side of Froggy Bottom Bog." "Where y'all was attacked by that Hydra? Now wait a second. You said that Zecora chased off Timberwolves. That's why Apple Bloom took those cooking pots. She's gone and went back into the forest." "And they're headed to that cave," added Fluttershy. "And Cherry went with them, I bet." Lance's headache was starting to get as strong as it was this morning. All this stress over Cherry was not good for him. "I'm gonna go get her." "Not alone you're not," said Applejack. "My sister's out there too, and I plan on giving that filly a piece of my mind. She knows not to go off the path, and, sir, that's as far off as you can get." "I'm coming too." Lance and Applejack looked at Fluttershy, and she ducked down. "If that's all right, I mean. You'll need a pony who knows the forest pretty well." Lance nodded to Fluttershy, and then they all headed out the door. The forest was on the other side of Ponyville, and it was going to take them forever to cross town, so they took off at a quick trot. Applejack said she needed to pick up extra supplies, and she'd meet up with Lance and Fluttershy at the forest. They carried on without her, traveling as quickly as they could. Lance couldn't believe his sister did this again. He couldn't believe he was going back in the forest, but Lance knew that he would travel to hell and back for his sister without a second thought. "I ain't giving up!" Sweat was breaking out across Apple Bloom's forehead. She was exhausted from trying to dig her way out past the rocks, as were the rest of the fillies, but they hadn't made any progress. They had been at it for so long they couldn't even guess what time it was. Scootaloo was again leaning back against the wall. Sweetie Belle was sitting by the lantern rubbing her hooves, and Cherry Blossom was sitting beside Scootaloo staring at the floor. She was the one responsible for all this. All because she wanted a dumb gemstone which she didn't even have now. It was buried under the rubble. I'm sorry, girls," she said, not looking up. "Oh, will you stop it?" Scootaloo snapped at Cherry. "Saying you're sorry 1,000 times isn't going to help any pony." Apple Bloom gave the wall one last weak buck. "I just can't budge it." Apple Bloom walked away from the rock wall, admitting defeat. They had all tried to move the rocks, but nothing short of a miracle was going to break it down. Apple Bloom was struggling to catch her breath. "Apple Bloom," Sweetie Belle whispered, "we should probably just wait for help." "But no pony knows we're down here." "They might come looking for us. Also—" Sweetie Belle stopped talking and looked at the lantern. None of the other ponies had noticed it, but some of the fireflies were losing their light. "A firefly dies when its light goes out. But these little guys should have lasted much longer than this." "What do you mean?" Cherry asked. I think we should stop trying to exhaust ourselves any further. The other ponies in the cave looked at her with confused looks. I don't think any... Sweetie Belle mumbles the next part silently to herself. The others looked at Sweetie Belle as tears started to roll down her face. We've probably only got a few hours of air left. What? Apple Bloom and Scootaloo shouted. The cave rumbled slightly. Cherry buried her face in her forelegs, crying silently. Her friends could still hear her sniffling in the complete silence that followed after the rumble, but none of the fillies moved. Only after Sweetie said that did they notice that their breathing was becoming deeper, which caused their heart rates to rise in a panic. They thought maybe it was because of their exhaustion, but now they feared that Sweetie Belle might be right. Scootaloo turned to Cherry. Oh, stop that. You don't see me crying, do you? Scootaloo was on the verge of tears, but she was using anger to cover it up. They then all looked away from each other, lost in their thoughts. Please. The three fillies looked at Cherry. I want to go home. Cherry jumped up and ran at the wall, scraping away at it with her forehooves. Some pony help us, please. Big brother, Fluttershy, help. Cherry's screaming and kicking was only making things worse. The shaking was getting louder, and Apple Bloom had to grab Cherry and pull her back. Cherry cried as Apple Bloom held her back. That ain't helping no pony. You hear? The tears fell fast down Cherry's face as she looked down at the floor. Then she whispered silently to herself, Mommy, help me. Lance and Fluttershy traveled through town as quickly as they could. Lance desperately wanted to run, but his body was causing him so much pain as it was just from a quick trot. It was getting late into the day. Crossing Ponyville took maybe an hour, and not only had they made that journey twice, but they'd also crossed Sweet Apple Acres and were also heading into the worst place any pony could travel. If they were lucky, they could make it in and out of the Everfree Forest before the night came. Fluttershy kept by Lance's side at all times. Although he knew she could fly off ahead, she refused to go without him. They reached the edge of Ponyville and could see the forest. There you two are! A voice from above made them both jump. Looking up, they saw Rainbow Dash flying towards them. Been looking all over for you. You find your sister yet? Huh? How'd you know she was missing? Lance asked. I told her. Lance looked down and jumped backwards. Pinkie Pie had appeared out of nowhere, as she always does, and was right nose to nose with Lance. What with everything else on his list of aches and pains, he was planning on adding a heart attack somewhere near the top. We think they're in the forest, said Fluttershy. In a cave on the other side of Froggy Bottom Bog. Pinkie's smile turned to a frown. With the Hydra? Ha! Rainbow Dash scoffed, still flying in the air above them. I tell you, if you had me with you, that Hydra would have been run off with its tail between its legs. We're not going through the swamp, Lance said, coming back to the conversation. We can go around it easily enough. Oh, but that'll take forever, whined the Cyan Pegasus. No, it won't. I think that was actually supposed to be Applejack. No, it won't. God. Okay. Alright. Let's take a moment here. Take a drink. Okay. Applejack voice. Easy. Simple. Simplest thing in the world. No, it won't. The four ponies looked around and saw three more heading towards them. Applejack had a pair of green saddlebags with a red apple on the strap on either side of her. The two other ponies were unicorns. Lance recognized the purple one as the Ponyville librarian Twilight Sparkle, and the other was a stunning beauty, a white unicorn with a long, well-groomed purple mane. Lance was surprised he'd never seen her around Ponyville before. You'd think a pony like that would stand out. See something you like, Lancey? Pinkie was giving Lance a sly look and fluttered her eyes a few times. Lance turned slightly red, realizing he might have been staring, and quickly went on the defensive. What? No, I just... I was... Pinky giggled and then bounced away. Lance, clearly embarrassed, turned to Applejack. What's going on? Well, I was just coming to meet y'all, but I wanted to stop by Rarity's first. Check if the girls were there, but she wasn't, and also my suspicions about them going into the forest increased when she said her sister had taken a cooking pot, too. Sweetie Belle said she was taking one of my pants to try and earn a cooking cutie mark. Oh, that filly is going to get an earful when I get her home. The white unicorn that Lance guessed was Rarity looked really angry. He'd hate to be around her when she gets mad. And Twilight here has charted us a route through the forest that gets us to that cave lickety-split. Wait, how'd you get here so fast? Me and Fluttershy only just got here, said Lance, confused. Well, Applejack is one of the top athletes in Ponyville, next to Rainbow Dash, said Twilight. Yeah, next to, Rainbow Dash gloated from above. Applejack gave her a look of disdain. So I guess she just ran a lot faster than you, Twilight surmised. Lance could see her point. He was hurt and couldn't move fast, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. Now, let's get moving. Applejack took a few steps forward. Now, hold on, Lance called out as they all moved forward. I thank you for your help, but do we really need so many ponies going in there? What are you talking about, darling? Said Rarity. Did you forget that our sisters are in there, too? She walked past him towards the forest. Yeah, we ain't just doing this for you alone. Our kin is in there, and we're going to get them out. Applejack walked past him as well, followed by Twilight. Rainbow flew in overhead, then Pinky bounced by them, leaving Lance and Fluttershy. Am I really that selfish? Fluttershy walked over to Lance and placed a hoof on him. You do what you think is best for Cherry, but you've got to realize that there's more to it than just what you think. Fluttershy took a step back, thinking maybe she was invading his personal space. Oh, I'm sorry, but you should think about what she thinks, what she wants. Fluttershy followed her friends into the forest. Lance thought about it for a second, then looked up. It was starting to get late. He turned and moved as quickly as he could to catch up with the others. The four fillies sat around the lantern. It was growing dimmer with each passing hour. At least, they guessed it was an hour. It could have been 5 minutes. They just sat still, hardly moving, their breathing the only noise in the cave. It scared them, but they couldn't think of anything else. No way out. No pony was coming. Skooloo's bump on her head was throbbing gently, and she really wanted to sleep, but Sweetie Belle warned her not to even dare close her eyes. They were each feeling tired and wanted to lie down, but Sweetie Belle had told them all that if they did... Let's try it one more time. But Sweetie Belle told them all that if they fell asleep they might not wake up again, especially Skooloo. They were starting to get cold, and the lantern, which provided light, didn't provide any heat. The light wouldn't last much longer. They could only see each other now, and the light barely touched the walls around them. Should we let them go? Sweetie Belle asked. The others weren't sure what she was talking about. Let who go? Skooloo looked at Sweetie Belle like she'd gone mad. Them! Sweetie Belle was pointing at the fireflies in the lantern. There were only 4 left. But then we won't be able to see, Apple Bloom complained. We won't be able to see for much longer anyway. And they're in the same situation as we are, trapped in a small space with no way out, Sweetie Belle said, reasoning with the others. Cherry felt a sharp pain in her chest. This was her fault. Those 4 words repeated over and over in her mind. If she had just listened to her brother, as horrible as it was to think about, and never seen her friends again, they wouldn't be in this mess right now. They were better off without her. I say let them go, Skooloo said. There was nowhere for them to really go, but it's better to be trapped in a big open space, flying free, than trapped in a small area like they were. Apple Bloom agreed and then looked at Cherry. She nodded her head but didn't look up. Sweetie Belle reached for the lantern. Wait! Cherry interrupted, surprising the other fillies. I'm scared of being alone in the dark." Scootaloo rolled her eyes and smiled as she slid closer, wrapping her foreleg around Cherry's. "You won't be alone." Cherry looked at the orange Pegasus. She was the first friend she ever made, and Cherry couldn't have asked for a better one. Apple Bloom then moved over to Cherry's other side. "Yeah, we're the Cutie Mark Crusaders." "Till the very end," Sweetie Belle finished as she moved over to join her friends. Cherry didn't deserve such great friends, but she couldn't help but smile. Each of them had a smile on their faces as Sweetie Belle opened the lantern and the 4 fireflies flew upwards and around the small cave. They imagined the fireflies were playing and laughing, enjoying their freedom. The Crusaders just watched the 4 little lights until they faded out, one by one. It had taken longer than they expected. The sun was starting to come down, and they guessed that they had maybe 2 hours before nighttime. They finally made it to the cave, but only just spotted it. The mouth of the cave was huge. Large boulders surrounded the entrance, and a few vines dropped down, hiding it from sight. "Ew! We have to go in there?" Rarity whined. "Oh, quit your whining, girl. You knew we were headed to a cave," Applejack said as she jumped up onto one of the large boulders. "I just prefer not to get my hooves dirty. But if I—" Rarity was interrupted mid-sentence as Rainbow Dash flew over her head. "Are you coming inside or not?" Rarity scowled at Rainbow, then tossed her head up as she headed to the rocks. Lance was already trying to climb them, being helped up by Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy. His bad leg refused to give him enough strength to climb over alone. He felt pathetic and a little embarrassed. "I swear, that little filly is going to be in so much trouble when I see her," Lance said after getting help down the other side. "You should take it easy on her," said Fluttershy. "You don't want to go upsetting the deer again." It's very dark in here." Twilight looked around the cave and could barely see a thing. She then tilted her head up, and the tip of her horn glowed, casting a purple light to every corner. "That's better. Come on, every pony." They all followed Twilight into the cave, and Pinkie bounced alongside Lance. "What happened between you and Cherry, anyway?" asked Pinkie Pie. "That's a long story." "Well, it's a long cave." Pinkie smiled at Lance, and so to take his mind off his headache, he told Pinkie the entire story. Lance knew the others would be listening in, but these ponies were good friends of Fluttershy's and Pinkie's. Lance told them about the Hydra, the attack on Zecora, the argument they had afterwards, then the fight at dinner. Lance finished the story after the moment Cherry had run away to Fluttershy's home and then returned to Fluttershy. "Then, the next morning you told her to come back to my home and she ran away, right?" Well, actually, she said she wanted to go alone after I told her I'd be taking her home. Oh, I'm such a fool. I should have guessed something was wrong." "Hey, but don't beat yourself up, Sugar Cube. Ain't no pony could have seen that coming." "Well, I think it's just awful what happened," Rarity said, before turning to Lance. "How could you be so insensitive to the little deer's feelings?" Lance did a double take. "Huh? Well, I mean, honestly, I'm very glad you weren't hurt worse than you were, but it sounded like you just, in your anger, took it all out on her. But and to treat her like that, forbidding her from seeing her friends again, of course she's going to run away." Lance was really beginning to not like this pony. She seemed to have a know-it-all attitude that he didn't like, though he couldn't help but think that she might be right. "Being siblings is a give-and-take relationship. You've been doing a whole lot of taking by the sounds of it and not enough giving. You've got to be like apple pie." Lance didn't have a clue what she was talking about. Applejack just laughed. "Wow, Rarity. If you're gonna re-gift my advice, maybe you should try and have it make sense." Rarity said nothing and kept walking. "Listen, Lance. She'll come around soon enough, and you'll be a happy family again, but if y'all are going to stay in that filly's good graces, you better start thinking about what she wants. Sure, it's easy to know what's best for the filly, but sometimes you got to give in to what they want. Be your big brother when she needs you. Don't try and control her." Lance looked at both Applejack and Rarity. His headache was certainly not improved by his attitude. Had not improved his attitude when it came to taking advice. Well, if you're both such great experts in foal-sitting, then tell me what your sisters were doing in this cave in the middle of a dangerous forest. Applejack and Rarity looked at each other, then turned to Lance. Just trying to give some neighborly advice. No need to be like that, Applejack said, sounding offended. Rarity said nothing and just kept walking forward. Lance felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't who he really was. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to act like that. I've just been through the worst weekend of my life, and I'm worried sick about my sister. Applejack turned back to look at him again. That's all right, partner, given your situation. I might have a short fuse and all. Lance smiled back at Applejack, and then kept walking with Twilight still leading the way. Surrounded by darkness, the fillies kept close to each other. Their breathing was becoming deeper as their lungs tried to pull in more air. The fillies were tired and could no longer remain sitting down. They were lying next to each other, hoof in hoof, so they knew that their friends were with them. They didn't stay in silence because it was too horrible to consider the alternative, so they kept talking in whispered hushes. And then I tripped over the tablecloth and fell into the music player, which scratched to a stop. Applebloom was telling Cherry about how she first met Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle. With every pony looking at me, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon just made fun of me, calling me a blank flank. And that's when Sweetie Belle and I stepped in to defend her, Scootaloo added. Yeah, we started talking about how Applebloom had the potential to be anything she wanted, from a scientist to even the mayor. We've since then tried, but none of us got a cutie mark while trying those. Applebloom laughed. Soon, every pony at the party was paying attention to us instead of Diamond Tiara. We never saw them again for the rest of the party after that. After Applebloom stopped talking, they were all silent for a few seconds. Cherry could hear each of the girls breathing heavily. The talking was draining each of their strengths too fast, but none of them wanted to stop talking because the silence was much worse. It was becoming scary for each of the fillies. Cherry felt sick, like her heart was going to erupt out of her throat at any moment. They were all suffering because of her, and she wanted to cry, but she'd already shed all the tears she had, apologized as often as she could have before her friends told her to stop. Hearing her say that was like it was the end. They'd all agreed that they shouldn't give up, that they would tell stories until some pony saved them. Well, should I go next? Sweetie Belle asked. Go on then, said Scootaloo. This was one of the best days of my life. It's about the Sisterhood Social. Me and Rarity had a big argument the day before about how much unsister-like she always was, and how she never wanted to spend time with me. And she was mad at me because everything nice I did for her always ended up with me ruining something of hers. I ran away and stayed with Applebloom and Applejack for the rest of the day. Watching them both playing and working together was getting me upset because my sister would never do anything with me, or want to work as a team. She tried to butter me up that night and tried to take me home, but she was still being the same selfish pony. Sweetie Belle stopped talking for a moment. She needed to rest for a moment, to catch her breath. Sweetie Belle? Cherry asked worriedly. I'm okay. Anyway, on the day of the social, Applebloom said she'd run the race with me, and I was so happy. At the start, she fell into the mud and disappeared. That was the good part, Applebloom laughed quietly. When she came back up, Sweetie Belle continued, she was covered from head to hoof in mud. We ran the entire race and were doing great together and almost won the whole thing, but we were beaten by another pair of ponies. It was only after that I realized that it wasn't Applejack I raced with. It was my own sister. They were all in on it together to get me reunited with my sister. I can't believe you didn't notice sooner, Applebloom laughed. I was worried that the eyes were going to be a dead giveaway. What about you, Cherry? You have a story? Scootaloo asked. Well, Cherry struggled to think of something. Then she thought about her brother. Something he said to her. One time, before I came to Ponyville, me and my brother were in his room looking out the bedroom window while covering ourselves with the bed sheets. If our dad came in, we would quickly lie down and pretend to be sleeping. In Las Pegasus, the bright lights outside were always on. We lived in a small house that was cheap because of all the advertising boards that blocked out almost all the scenery. The bright lights, well, they kept us awake most nights. We had no curtains either. Cherry was quickly losing her breath. She took a moment, then carried on. Well, we were watching out the window, watching a Wonderbolt's performance at night. I've seen fireworks before, but this was different. I'd never seen such amazing flying before. The stunts they did, even though they were so far away, I could see how amazing they were. Cherry was struggling to catch her breath. She stopped talking again for a moment. Cherry, don't push your... Scootaloo wanted to tell her to take it slower, but the little filly carried on. I looked at my brother, and I asked him if we could go see them one day. He then... My brother whispered to me that one day he'd take me to not only see them, but he'd show me the best places. Cherry broke down in tears again. She missed her brother with all her heart. Her friends next to her said nothing, but they let her know that they were there with her, staying right by her side. Scootaloo reached over Cherry Blossom's head and pulled her into a one-legged hug. It could still happen, Scootaloo whispered. Yeah, when we get out of here, we'll see the world together, Sweetie Belle added. Together. Apple Bloom placed a hoof over Cherry's. Their eyes had adjusted to the dark, just enough to see their own outlines against the dark. Sweetie Belle placed a hoof over Apple Bloom's, and Scootaloo placed a hoof on Sweetie Belle's. Cherry calmed down and smiled. She truly did have the best friends in the world. They stayed like that for a moment, and then Apple Bloom broke the silence. Scootaloo, it's your turn. What's your favorite memory? Scootaloo smiled, but no pony saw it. You have to ask? It would have to be that awesome talent show we sang at. But that was awful, said Sweetie Belle. They laughed us off stage. I know, but think about it. It really was hilariously bad. What happened? Asked Cherry. Well, we were putting on a rock show. I was the lead singer. Sweetie Belle was in charge of the sets and props, which all looked terrible, Sweetie Belle added, and Apple Bloom was our main dancer. I was just throwing punches and kicks, even got my hoof stuck at one point. Well, Scootaloo continued, we got to perform in front of the entire town. My singing was wonderific. That's not a word, Sweetie Belle interrupted with a laugh. Oh, hush up, you walking dictionary. Scootaloo gave a weak laugh as well. Anyway, we were singing the Cutie Mark Crusaders theme song, and everything was going wrong, but we never stopped. Props got in our way. We were blinded by the smoke machine. And don't forget the weird costumes we were all wearing, said Apple Bloom. Hey, I thought you liked my costumes, said Sweetie Belle, sounding a little hurt. But with the crowd standing in total silence, we thought we had them in awe at how awesome we were. More like they had gone into shock. When we had finished, they had indeed laughed us off the stage, but when we went back on, they gave us the award for Best Comedy Act because we were so awful they thought it was a parody of a real rock concert. The three fillies laughed together quietly. You're right, Scootaloo, that is a great memory, said Apple Bloom. Totally, agreed Sweetie Belle. Scootaloo laughed again and then noticed Cherry wasn't laughing. Scootaloo gave her a gentle shake. What's wrong? Didn't you like that one? Cherry Blossom? And that's the end of chapter 14. And I really don't have much to say. So, yeah. Anyway, to clarify, no, I'm not crying. at all, so don't even get the wrong impression. Uh, so yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna get. I'm gonna go ahead and finish chapter 15 and get it uploaded too. So we'll have everything uploaded. So stay tuned.